Israel says it's moving ahead with plans to launch a full-scale ground offensive on the city of Rafah in southern Gaza.
How is Portugal reflecting 50 years after the Carnation Revolution?
Israel says it's moving ahead with plans to launch a full-scale ground offensive on the southern Gazan city of Rafah. Government spokesperson David Mencer said the target is 4 Hamas battalions reportedly based in the city, warning they cannot be shielded from Israel. The Israeli government previously declared Rafah a safe zone, and more than half of Gaza's population of 2.3 million sought shelter there. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, the senior humanitarian coordinator for Gaza says the future for many is hanging in the balance as the agency continues to work against difficulties.
The health infrastructure in Gaza has been decimated. The few hospitals still standing struggle to operate due to severe shortages of supplies and frequent power outages. As summer draws near and temperatures rise, communicable diseases threaten to sweep through Gaza.
Israel says aid has begun moving into Gaza more quickly after international pressure to increase access. Officials say 468 trucks entered the territory on Tuesday, but those numbers have been disputed by the United Nations and the Red Crescent. The UN says some trucks were only half full because of inspection rules. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has suspended public duties and says he will take time to stop and reflect on whether to remain in the job. That comes after a court opened a preliminary corruption inquiry into his wife. But some opposition politicians were quick to criticize the move, saying Sánchez was betting on victimization and pity.
Creemos que en lugar de desaparecer 5 días, el presidente debe de aparecer de manera urgente para dar una explicación razonada de los escándalos que rodean a su partido, a su gobierno y a su pareja.
Se desconoce si Pedro Sánchez anunciará su dimisión como presidente del gobierno o si continuará al frente del Ejecutivo. Una de las opciones es que plantee una cuestión de confianza en el Congreso para que el Pleno del Parlamento vuelva a otorgarle, en su caso, el apoyo para que siga al frente del gobierno. Otra opción es que anuncie su dimisión y proponga a otro candidato socialista, pero esto acarrearía la apertura de consultas con el jefe de Estado y el nuevo candidato tendría que someterse a una votación de investidura en el Congreso de los Diputados. Pedro Sánchez también podría anunciar que continúa en el gobierno hasta el 29 de mayo, plazo en el que por ley podría convocar unas nuevas elecciones generales que se celebrarían previsiblemente en el mes de julio. Sea cual sea la decisión del presidente del gobierno, Pedro Sánchez ha hecho de nuevo saltar el tablero político español y su decisión marcará sin duda el próximo ciclo electoral. En Madrid, Jaime Velázquez, Euronews.
More than half a century later, the voice of this Portuguese man still trembles with emotion when he speaks about his imprisonment by state police under the dictatorship of António de Oliveira Salazar.
3 meses muito complicados. Pode calcular o regime fascista e a PIDE, que era da escola da Gestapo. Aliás, comecei logo a levar pancada, a levar socos. Foi sempre a levar e com a tortura do sono, depois numa sala com uma injeção, com uma coisa qualquer.
50 years ago, Portugal's Carnation Revolution put an end to 4 decades of dictatorship. In March, the country embarked on another significant chapter. After 8 years of socialist government, support for the centre-right rose in the legislative elections, and the far-right Chega had a remarkable breakthrough. During the election campaign, Amnesty International issued some recommendations to all parties.
Áreas que nos preocupam francamente, as questões das migrações, a utilização dos migrantes e dos refugiados como bodes expiatórios para causar medo à população e e ganhar votos. O racismo existe, os comportamentos inadequados existem. A diferença com o Chega é que veio capitalizar isso para um discurso oficial.
Does this mean the achievements of the revolution are in danger? We asked Vasco Lourenço, a former captain in the Portuguese army who helped spark the rebellion.
Não há democracias perfeitas. Eu acho que é claro que um partido como o Chega não é nada democrático. Ele está a utilizar as regras democráticas para chegar ao poder, mas tudo indica, face à história, que se eles chegarem ao poder, tentarão acabar com a democracia. E, portanto, há que combatê-los dentro das regras democráticas.
Some of the values, such as freedom, equality, freedom of speech, that kind of democratic basic rights, are very much ingrained into Portuguese society. I think that broad notion of democracy as a set of individual but also collective rights, I think that's not endangered by the fact that the far right had 18% of votes in the last elections.
Sergio Godinho was in Canada the moment the Portuguese Revolution began. As a resistance singer, he was living in exile when he released his third studio album. Since then, he has established himself as one of the main voices of free and democratic Portugal. Planning a series of concerts to commemorate 50 years of freedom, he spoke to Euronews about how he experienced April 25th, the change, and where modern Portugal has yet to go in terms of rights and freedoms.
Estava em Vancouver, estava no Oceano Pacífico, ou seja, estava pacífico, e vim para a Balbúrdia.
E como é que foi esse regresso à Balbúrdia?
Foi muito bom. Eu tive durante 15 dias, estive aqui a cantar em inúmeros cantos livres que eram organizados quase cotidianamente e de uma maneira muito espontaneista, não é? E foi uma emoção, como é evidente, muito grande poder, enfim, cantar às pessoas que só tinha 2 discos, não é? Portanto, mas as pessoas cantaram as canções deste disco, dizer a liberdade está a passar por aqui, in loco, foi.
His song, Freedom, which was recorded in 1974, became an anthem of the Portuguese left. For him, the lyrics of freedom have not lost any of their relevance, and the result of the last elections in Portugal, where right-wing party Chega scored high, have given him a cause for concern about the future of the country.
Estas últimas eleições deram um abanão a muita gente, não é? Esta ascensão da extrema-direita é realmente qualquer coisa de assustador e preocupante. De maneira que acho que até o grau de adesão aos meus concertos eu sinto que tem a ver também com o facto das pessoas estarem um bocado abanadas e terem necessidade de se congregar e de reagir.
Sergio Godinho is touring the country with his concert. In addition to his major dates at the Colosseums in Lisbon and Porto, he has played in various symbolic spots in Portugal. During his tour dates, he will perform several of his songs that are well known throughout Portugal and have become symbols of the left.
Voters in North Macedonia cast ballots on Wednesday for a president they hope will oversee the country's long-anticipated entry into the European Union. 7 candidates were in the running for the largely ceremonial position, and the contest is expected to go to a May runoff on the same day as parliamentary elections. Campaigning was largely focused on progress towards joining the EU, the rule of law, and fighting corruption. Visitors to Venice who fail to pay the entry fee to the historic city centre will face fines starting at 10 times the €5 ticket price. Starting this year, tourists will have to pay to enter the lagoon city, a a move authorities have introduced to clamp down on the effects of over-tourism.
We need to find a balance, a new balance between the tourist and the resident. We need to safeguard the spaces of the resident, of course, and we need to discourage the arriving on day trippers in some particular days.
Venice has long suffered from excessive tourism, and the pilot entry charge, which will be in place on 29 days between April and July, is an attempt to limit visitor numbers. But some locals aren't convinced the entry fee will have any real impact.
Che siano chiari dove vengono investite tutte queste risorse, tutte queste entrate, perché se mi dicono che rimettono a posto le migliaia e migliaia di case che sono sfitte in questa città, allora penso che potrebbe anche essere sostenibile, per quanto io sia contro. E quindi, ma in realtà non sarà così, perché continuano a svuotarsi i residenti, questa città continua a far aumentare il turismo.
Officials say the scheme aims to reduce crowds on peak days, encourage longer visits, and improve the quality of life for residents. But it doesn't apply to anyone staying in Venice. A painting by the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt that was thought to be lost for 100 years has been sold at auction in Vienna. The unfinished work, Portrait of Fräulein Lisa, went to an unidentified buyer for 30 million euros. The painting was commissioned by a family of Jewish industrialists in 1917, a year before Klimt's death. The sale price set an art auction record for Austria.